once you start talking about something that is important to you, you are automatically putting yourself in that state of mind, that alignment with your inner soul self. It helps you hear yourself better because your stories are yours. They are not coming from the outside. So by default, it's not about the outside noise anymore. And I think it's really important to create self-awareness is to be connected to yourself and to not listen to everything else. And by telling your stories, by thinking about your stories, by bringing up your memories and your feelings, you're automatically doing that.
Hello, and welcome to episode 166 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave me a review or a rating. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Olena Mytruk works with high-achieving, deeply responsible working women who may wear many different hats, who strive for more, and who struggle with shame and guilt because they feel by dedicating their time to careers or spending time on themselves, they sacrifice their most important mission in life, being a mother. Born and raised in Ukraine, but currently living in the US and working as a technology executive at a Forbes Global 2000 and S&P 500 company, Olena knows firsthand what it feels like to tell yourself, I work too much. I put my job first. I'm a bad mother. Through the tough decision to divorce and over a decade of personal development practices, she learned an important lesson that shifted her mindset forever. Prioritizing her needs and her dreams isn't selfish. It sets a standard for her own daughter by showing her that she can listen to her desires and find fulfillment in both personal and work life. Olena has dedicated herself to equipping women to design their lives in a way that feels good to them and sets the best example for those looking up to them by embracing who they are and taking charge of their lives. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Olena. It's so nice to have you on today.
Thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. I'm looking forward to getting into your story and about storytelling, right? So, First off, tell us about yourself and your journey to becoming a life design educator and a founder and a chief education officer.
That's a lot of words, right?
Yes, it is.
And it has been a long journey and a very unplanned journey. I never planned to be anything like that. I never planned to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. I had my corporate career. I studied math in school. I got a job and I thought everything was planned out in my life until it wasn't. A sequence of events happened in my life that completely shifted its direction. First, I got divorced after being married for 9 years. Then I moved to the US from Ukraine with my daughter as a single mom. She was 4 years old back then. I got remarried in the midst of pandemic in 2020. That is a separate story on its own.
Yeah.
And with all that journey, life journey, I was discovering more about myself. I was learning what I can do, what I'm capable of. And at some point, at the end of 2020, I decided to start my own business and to help other women also come back to who they are, embrace who they are, take charge of their lives. Because once you do that, like I know now, everything changes. But even back then, it wasn't about educating anybody. Back then, I didn't even think I had anything to teach or share. The main thing I knew how to do was technology. My background is in technology. I have a full-time job in a technology company. And so I decided to create a mobile app. So it was going to be a goal-setting mobile app for women. I spent the whole year of 2021, developing it, designing it, bringing it to life. And then it went live at the end of 2021. And once it was live, once it got in the hands of actual women, I discovered that it's not really about the tool, because people were texting me, messaging me how to use the tool. And as I was helping them actually navigate that whole goal setting and life journey process, I was also gaining, I guess, more and more confidence about the fact that I actually have something to share, that I do have knowledge that can be valuable for some people, that I got something to say, that people listen, that it helps them, they benefit from it. And eventually, this is what brought me to where I am today, teaching women how to navigate life. And what is really interesting, and I didn't even think about it until recently, when I was in school, professors would always tell me that I would be very good at teaching. They wanted me to come back to school as a professor. And I would always be like, no, I don't want to be a math professor. That's not how I see my life. But I guess in a way, I got back to that prophecy, not as a math teacher, but as a teacher. So they were right.
Yeah, they were right. Awesome. We're going to get a lot more into the work that you do, but first, you're a fellow introvert. We chatted earlier about that. Just tell us about how you figured out that you were an introvert, and did you need to do anything to embrace that?
Yeah, so for many years, I actually didn't even know what that truly meant, because I have always been a reserved person, very shy person. As a kid, I would never share, even with my parents, or especially with my parents, when I was having some troubles at school. I would always keep things to myself, and I never wanted to talk about what I was going through, what I was navigating. And I guess I had this label, that we all have this. Probably we took these personality tests when we were teenagers, and those tests would tell me that I'm an introvert. And I was like, okay. And I always thought that was about me being shy and reserved, and this is what introversion is and nothing more. And what was interesting and what I was always having trouble understanding is, how can I be confidently talking as a manager in my corporate job if I'm a shy and reserved person? And how at the same time I have such a hard time coming to somebody to say hi, somebody who I don't know, in a meeting or at the event. And it wasn't until a couple years ago, I think, when I really discovered what it is to be introvert. And it was an accident, really. We were talking to somebody from our daughter's school, and we were saying that she is shy. And he said, no, she's more reserved. And I was like, oh, I thought these are the same things. And I got back home and I started Googling it. And I discovered that, first of all, these are different things, but also that introversion is not equal to be reserved or shy, and that you can be reserved and not be an introvert, and you can be an introvert and not be reserved. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. I discovered that being an introvert is really a quality that is about being inner focused and about requiring time alone to recharge more than anything else. It's not about not being able to talk to people. It's just about having this extra need to recharge alone, to spend time alone. And that made total sense, because I know that I need that time alone after a long day at work, after talking to people. I need that. And now I know why, because I am an introvert.
Yeah, that's what I always say. You're inner focused, and we do need time to recharge. And
Yeah.
we actually need a lot of time alone. We still like to hang out with people, our family and friends and others, but we need some time for some other things too. So what have you found that you need alone time to do in your work or in your life besides recharging?
It's just, I need this to function sometimes, honestly.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I feel like I rush through the day, when I feel overwhelmed with information, I need to get away, get out of the house. Sometimes I will go for a run. This is something that I discovered to be very much helping me to really clear up my mind. And it's interesting because it's a physical activity, so it's not rest in normal terms, but it is my alone time. It is the time when I don't have to think. Sometimes I feel like I get too overwhelmed with thinking because of that ability to be inner focused. It is a blessing and a curse. And finding those moments when you are busy doing something else, but not thinking really helps. And it's hard to do that when you are around people. So sometimes I don't even feel guilty anymore asking my family, my husband, to just give me some time alone. At the end of the day, after dinner, I can tell him, I just need 20 minutes. Just please let me go to the bedroom, sit in the bedroom. I'm okay. I just need that time after talking to people all day. And now that I know that I need that, I have no problems asking for that and expressing that need.
Okay. And so, did you have to work that out where he understood that? Did that take any time?
He's a very understanding man,
Okay,
thankfully.
awesome. That's great.
It's more me allowing myself to ask than
Yeah,
him giving me permission.
yeah. And sometimes, we feel bad, with our especially our families. It's like, you know what? I do need it, just like you just said, but we feel bad. But it's like, you know what? This is something I need. I love you, but I just need a little time. And, once they can understand that, that's great. And they might need it too from time to time. So
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
definitely this inner focus brings strengths. Sometimes that's not understood. What's a strength that you have because you're an introvert?
I can just repeat what you just said, David. Really
Okay.
having that natural ability to connect with yourself once you discover that you have that ability. And this is, I think, what's so important and so understated, because with all the amount of information that gets thrown at us every single day, sometimes we don't have time or capacity to listen to ourselves. But once we do, I think us introverted people have this advantage, because I think we are like wired in a specific way to hear what our gut or intuition or inner self is telling us. And looking back on my life, the most life-changing, impactful decisions that I have made, I've always made them after letting myself sit still and just wait for them to come. And I always like to say they felt right. I could be very logical, very analytical. I could come up with endless lists of pros and cons, but it wasn't until it felt right. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I think this is really the advantage and the strengths that we as introverted people have. Once we know how to use it, once we learn to give ourselves that permission to sit still, step back, just relax, let it go. Don't stress about finding that decision, and just trust in the universe that at some point it will come to you. It will.
Yeah, I relate to that very much. And, sometimes we make quick decisions, but myself, just like what you just said, when I think back on the big decisions that I've made, the good ones have come with time, you know? And I think, okay, if I had rushed that, and maybe someone was pressuring me to rush something, if I had rushed that, it wouldn't have gone so well. So normally we think about something, the idea rolls around in our head for however long that, if it's an hour or days or whatever it is, but we give ourselves time to think and we can come up with some really great stuff.
Yeah. And for me, sometimes it took months. And that was the problem, because people around me, they weren't willing to give me those months. There is always this
Yeah.
pressure. Oh, you gotta decide what you gotta do. And then we put this pressure on ourselves. We tell ourselves, I gotta decide what I need to do. And that pushes us back. That creates the opposite effect. We can't find that right decision
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, sometimes there's a balance in there, maybe a deadline, after X amount of time. It just depends on what it is.
Yeah.
So on the show, we talk about strengths and needs of introverts, and we bust some myths. I think you busted a couple already, that introversion doesn't necessarily mean shyness or being reserved. Is there any other myths you want to bust today on introversion?
I think the big one that I had to break for myself is that introverts cannot be good speakers, communicators, or even that introverts all have low energy. I have a very high level of energy. And
Yeah.
sometimes it even comes as a surprise to me. And even when I was thinking of starting my own podcast, I was considering whether I would be even able to do it because I'm an introvert. So how can I talk to not even a person, but a monitor or a microphone? And I think it is really a myth. So again, you can be a very good communicator. You can become an amazing speaker. It's just about giving yourself more time to prepare, to put yourself in the right state of mind, but also knowing that after that podcast recording or being on a stage, you might need time to hide, take some time alone to recharge, because you will need that. But it doesn't mean you cannot influence others by saying things that will really create a good impact.
Yeah. And, I've had a lot of people on the show that either are public speakers themselves and or work with a lot of other public speakers, and majority are introverts.
Which is sort of like a paradox, honestly.
Yeah.
But as you think about it, it makes sense, because again, we are inner focused. Because we are deep thinkers, we come up with deeper ideas and ideas that are worth sharing. It's just a matter of giving yourself permission to share those ideas.
Yeah, well said. I gave a 2-hour speech this week. Loved it. My energy was great. I'm like, oh, when can I do this again? And so, but we have to prepare differently than our extroverted friends. I had to prepare well ahead of time and then let the presentation kind of roll around in my head to see if I wanted to make any tweaks and be ready to capture those things as the ideas came. I made sure to not have anything to do that morning or afterwards. Just like the podcast, it's like an hour before I have blocked off and an hour after I have blocked off. So I'm ready. And also, so if I need to recharge, I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I also try to rehearse. And when I record podcast episodes, I script them. And I even say them in my head, trying to see if it's going to sound naturally, because I don't want to be sounding artificially. Otherwise, I'll just get lost in the process. So I really need to make sure that the words will flow. And these are the words that I would use in the verbal speech, because sometimes in the written speech, we might say something that we wouldn't say out loud in the same way. So yeah, we do need time to prepare, but I feel like our extroverted friends probably need that time too for anything good.
Yeah, everybody needs to prepare. It's just a little different, and they do have a skill that we don't necessarily have. They're better at winging it, and sometimes they really enjoy that. And not that we can't wing it too, but it's just we need to prepare a little more, a little differently, and they need to prepare, but they're also just good at thinking on their feet a little bit more. And again, not that we can't do that, but our skill is preparation ahead of time. And you do have to figure out what your process is. We're probably all going to differ a little bit, but we can be amazing speakers. That's a great myth to bust.
Yes.
All right. So tell us about the work that you're doing now.
So today, besides my corporate job, which I still do have, I work with women. I call them multifaceted women. It's women who wear a lot of hats, juggle a lot of duties, responsibilities every day. And I am myself a very multifaceted woman. So I'm a mother. I have 2 jobs. I try to also take care of myself, my physical health, find time for my hobbies. And it is a lot. It is a lot to navigate, a lot to balance. And what I also discovered is what usually stands in the way of us achieving what we want in life. It's usually all these emergencies, things that happen out of the blue, things go sideways, something goes wrong. And in order to deal successfully with those emergencies, we need time, capacity, energy, confidence. And usually we don't have enough of those things. Because in order to feel more energy, we need to make the time to recharge. But how do we make the time to recharge if we don't have the energy or confidence to push back on something that gets thrown at us? So it's like a paradox. We need these things, but we don't have them. And what I have learned from my own life and using my analytical mind, I guess my study in math probably helped, is that life is not linear. Life is not just a set of causes and effects. It's a complicated system And you need to treat it as a system. So you need to look at some underlying structures, behaviors, circles. So you can't just fix one thing and hope that everything will be fixed in the other place. And so all of these realizations, they helped me come up with the approach that I now call life design, is how to intentionally approach your life in a way that you can optimize it for maximum time, maximum capacity, maximum energy, so that eventually you can actually achieve more in life, more meaningful, tangible results, and feel better in the process, love yourself in the process, love your family, enjoy time with your family, enjoy the work that you do, enjoy going for a run, instead of constantly feeling overwhelmed, stressed, tired, guilty, and all these other things. So instead of striving for work-life balance, which is such a cliche, I like to say, I want to aim for work-life harmony. It's about being in alignment with yourself, doing things today, this minute, that matter most, knowing that you have so many things to do, but you have to pick one at any point in time. And so I help women find those things, find that compass, how they can understand what is really more important today. Where do I want to dedicate my time and energy today that will help me refuel my life so that tomorrow I have more time and more energy to do something else?
Yeah, so it's not work-life balance, and I've definitely talked about this before. It's really, your priorities and how you're gonna, some days you might spend more time working, some days you might spend more time with your family. Likely not gonna be in perfect balance at any given time.
Yes, like I like to say, whenever you focus on one thing, you automatically do not focus on anything else. So there is no balance. There is
Right.
always no balance. Life is constantly out of balance in this way. So to your point, I think you're absolutely right. Like I give myself permission to work late one day if I know that something requires my attention, because I know that the next day I will give myself permission to go attend my daughter's dance performance in the morning. So I will skip work because at that time, her performance is more important. And having that flexibility in life, having that set of inner like value system and strengths, and using strengths to push back on things, saying no to things that you have to say no to, sometimes yourself, sometimes others. This is what I really stand for so strongly. And this is why, this is one of the things why even the idea of your podcast resonated with me so much, because you're talking about strengths. It's so much aligned with what I believe in, leading with your strengths, using your strengths. There's so much potential, untapped potential in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, your daughter's performance isn't gonna come around again, so but
No.
your work is very important too. You need both, and you just gotta figure it out. How do you help other women set priorities?
So again, it's a framework. It's I teach all of that. It's not a one-time thing, but honestly, in very simple terms, you ask yourself, what really matters most at this point? What is the impact of things that I can do? Like, you can list everything that's on your plate, and sometimes it might be 5 things or 50 things. And you know that you have to pick one, because I think the first step to understand is that your capacity is not unlimited. You cannot do 50. As much as you want to think that you will, you won't. So at some point, life will make the choice for you. So I like to think of it, I want to take it in my own hands. I want to choose. And then you ask yourself, okay, why do I want to do this specific thing? And it's about connection to your values, in my opinion. It's about understanding what is important. And sometimes we get forced by others or by some fear, some judgment to do something. And this is not the way, it's not the good reason to do something. It's not the good motivation to do something, even though it might be very strong. So what I'm helping women uncover is their true core values, something that creates meaning in life, something that when you do it, you are so deeply connected to that why that you are willing to fight for it. And because once you have that, it gives you that energy to fight. You know that why, you can feel it, you can sense it, and then you can defend that priority. because you know why it is so important to you because of that value that is connected to it. And tapping into your values, understanding your values is a completely different story. But the way to, like, one of the things you can do to even get started is to ask yourself in what situations in the past you have felt happy, fulfilled, accomplished, like something that you did really warmed your heart, because usually it's in those activities that we know that we engage our values. We are aligned with our values. And the more we do that, the more aligned we will be with the priorities that we set.
Yeah. And I've tried to do everything before too, and it doesn't work.
No.
Um, I'm curious. So, just personally, how often do you take some deep time to think about your values and priorities? How often do you revisit that, or is there a process like that for you?
I think for me, it has become, thankfully, I don't want to brag, but I think it has become a bit of a habit. And I know that there are things that I need and value in life. I have them actually written down, and I do have a framework which like online mapping system. So sometimes I will take a look at it and I will remind myself of those. But I know the core ones. I usually have not a big struggle understanding my whys, but it's not always easy. Sometimes I really have to change priorities like minutes by minutes. Honestly, there was a vacation that we took about a year ago that was supposed to be a vacation, but then I had to work. My husband had to work. Our daughter, she was staying with my mother-in-law, and she was texting me, and my husband was at the same time texting me about something happening at his work, and I was dealing with some insane issue at work, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I just can't handle with everything at once. It was so overwhelming. So I had to literally like sit back, close my eyes, take a few deep breaths to calm down physically. And then I wrote down things. Okay, so what do I need to do? I have this work issue. That's one. I need to touch base with my husband to find out what's going on with him. That's two. I need to explain to my daughter why we're not having vacation when we are supposed to. That's three. And I literally had to prioritize these three things within a matter of hours. And the way I did that was by asking myself, okay, what is really most important right now? The first one was connect with my husband, text him, make sure he's okay. The second one was to explain to my daughter and find the right words for her while explaining why her and me and dad, we have to work. And then the third one was come back to that issue. And actually I ended up working the whole vacation. I ended up working that whole week. And that was a tough decision, but I knew why. I knew that was a very important project. And I take pride in delivering high quality service for my clients and in general, in the corporate job as well. And I just couldn't let it slip. So even though it was hard, I was in alignment with why I'm doing this. And it helped me find strengths to explain even to my daughter that our 1 week vacation actually got ruined.
Yeah. So it can be minute by minute for sure. All right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this work that you're doing, it's really heavily based in storytelling and people telling their stories, right?
And people actually uncovering their own stories.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't even have to tell them out loud. You have to tell these stories to yourself to begin with.
Yeah. So tell us about your podcast.
My podcast is called Breviarie Handbook. And the reason it's called Handbook is because what I discovered not so long ago, about a year ago, really, is that telling your own stories is a very powerful tool to discover who you are, what you're capable of, what your life looks like. And so it's like a handbook. So I like to joke that every episode of my podcast is a page, is in my handbook. It's like a life manual. So I flip pages of my life manual, of my handbook, because it helps me learn more about myself. In the process of uncovering, remembering my stories, I learn more about myself. And also, I hope that while doing that and by doing that, I empower and encourage my listeners to start telling their stories. I hope that it's giving them permission to be vulnerable, be themselves, because coming back to introverts and us being inner focused, we have to know who we are. We have to give ourselves permission to be who we are. And I find that telling your stories is the first and very important step in giving yourself that permission.
Yeah. So, how did you figure that out for yourself that storytelling was important for you to be able to get to know yourself and share that story?
It wasn't an easy journey. Like I said, when I was a kid, I would never tell anybody anything about myself, really. And I, even with my friends, I would be very reserved. And when I met my husband, my second husband, my now husband, he got very genuinely interested about my life story because I had moved countries, and he likes to say that I went to the best school in Soviet Union, which I did. But to me, it was always like, come on, that doesn't matter. That's not important. And he would always be like, oh no, you have a very fascinating story. And even when we would meet some friends, some people, he would always be like, oh, here is my girlfriend or my wife, and she is from Ukraine, and she went to the best school in Soviet Union. And I'd be like, stop embarrassing me. Like, that doesn't matter. Nobody cares. And so I didn't really believe him. But I guess his words kind of was settling in my mind because I was starting slowly to be more open about my stories. And then about a year and a half ago, I went to a retreat with other 10, 12 women. I had not met them before. I only had met a couple of them, but I wanted to get out of my shell. And it was COVID, and I just wanted to go to travel somewhere, get out of my house. So I went to this retreat. It was this beautiful farm, and it was the first day of the retreat. We gathered in the living room of that farm for the evening, and there was this ritual, which I didn't know was going to happen. It was called circle. So we all sat on the floor in the circle, and we were all given a card with some word. And we were asked to think about something that word means to us, some personal story. So I started thinking about my word. It was the word hope, and it had something very, very deeply personal at that time related to that word, very vulnerable. And so I was thinking about this. I was getting very emotional. And then the host of the retreat, she said, okay, now let's share each other's stories with the group. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do that. No way I can share my story with everybody. I don't know these women. Like, I can't. And so one woman started sharing her story, another one shared her story, and almost everybody shared their stories. And I was second to last. And my thoughts were spinning. If I do it, I got to do it now because I can't be last. So I have to do it. And I almost forced myself to do it. I told myself, this is why you got here. You wanted to get out of your shell. So go ahead and do it. And so I started talking, and my heart was racing. It's even racing now as I'm remembering that. And I guess I thought that the world would collapse on me, but it didn't. And as I was sharing that very personal story, there was this silence in the room, and everybody was listening. And I realized that it's not scary. And it also felt very light. It felt like I had this tension inside me related to that story. And it was suddenly out. And I felt lighter. I felt free. I felt so awesome and proud and just amazing. And after that, that was the moment when I really realized that it is so, so powerful overcoming that barrier, but then seeing what's on the other side. It gives you just impossible feeling, amazing feeling. And I wanted to continue experiencing that. And I wanted to help others experience that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, why do you think you were, or other women or other men, and it could be introverts or not introverts, are reluctant to share their stories?
For me, I think the main reason was always I didn't think that I had anything interesting to share, that something worth sharing was in my life or in my expertise or in my experience. And I think another reason is that we are afraid of being judged. We are afraid of being claimed stupid for sharing anything. So we decide to keep it to ourselves. And this is all fair. And I wouldn't recommend to anybody to go beyond your limitations and do that anyway, even if you don't feel comfortable. But what I would say is that people will or might consider you stupid no matter what. Not everybody will like us. Not everybody will believe that we are smart, regardless of what we say or do not say. Some people might say that we are stupid because we didn't say something. So it's really about separating yourself from what others might think of you and doing what's best for you. And what I have learned is, even if you don't think that there is anything in particular in the story, just writing it down sometimes brings additional memories, helps you process it for yourself and uncover real lessons. What I even learned, even since I started my podcast, sometimes what I thought was going to be my story, as I was scripting it, I would change the lesson in the story, even though the events happened several years ago. As I was remembering them, I was learning something new. And this is, I think, the beauty of it, really. And it doesn't have anything to do with what others might think about you.
Yeah. Again, I'm relating so much to what you're saying. I started blogging about 10 years ago when I finally embraced my introversion. Just having to put it down and gather your thoughts really helped me even become more self-aware. And then I've been doing the podcast for the last 3 years. Like, same thing, putting together your thoughts just really helped me understand who I am, but it also just gave me an incredible amount of confidence. Like I said, I spoke for 2 hours. I shared a lot of my stories, and it was a great time. And I definitely was one like, oh, people aren't interested in my story, but they are.
And you will never find out until you try. So this is another interesting thing. Sometimes we sit and we wait for the perfect moment or for the perfect situation. But what it really all about is about taking that first step. The journey will not unfold in front of you until you take that step, until you start. And then you will see where to go next. I think it's true for telling stories or doing really anything. Taking that first step.
As human beings, we're built on stories. The stories have been told since the beginning of time. So we need to understand that, right?
Yeah. And I think this is why it's so natural. It is natural for us. I think as we grow up, we create those limitations around ourselves. I don't think as little kids we care really about what somebody might think about us. But then as we grow up, we start seeing what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what others are saying. And if they're not saying what we believe, then we will not say what we think, because we will feel like we are wrong. Sometimes it might be, oh, they're so smart, but they're not saying what I'm thinking, so I might be thinking something stupid. And because of that, sometimes the great ideas never get shared.
That's right. They need to be shared. I'm really interested in the self-awareness piece. So how does that help your clients bring self-awareness by really sharing their stories?
So it comes back to that connection with yourself. Because once you start talking about something that is important to you, you are automatically putting yourself in that state of mind, that alignment with your inner soul self. It helps you hear yourself better because your stories are yours. They are not coming from the outside. So by default, it's not about the outside noise anymore. And I think it's really important to create self-awareness is to be connected to yourself and to not listen to everything else. And by telling your stories, by thinking about your stories, by bringing up your memories and your feelings, you're automatically doing that without taking any specific effort or trying any specific techniques like meditation, for example. You could just tell a story about something that happened and how you felt. and why you felt that, and what you were seeing, what you were feeling, what you were sensing, what you were smelling. And as you are creating that picture in your own mind, you are bringing yourself to that situation, you will learn more about yourself just because of how storytelling works.
So, how do you have your clients share their stories?
It's usually it's part of the sessions. So I have facilitated sessions within the program, and it's usually in the breakout rooms when we do this sort of brainstorming. It's not necessarily storytelling per se, but we all often play. We try to spot our strengths, or we try to help each other understand our values. And this is usually when I ask each person in a breakout room to bring a specific situation, tell a specific story, what happened to them and how they were feeling. And then the other people in the group, they start asking questions, because I think it's very important for us in a discussion to get curious before we start jumping to some conclusions. I think it's very natural for us to come with our advice, our best ideas, and then the person is again disconnected from themselves. So once somebody tells their story, others first ask some clarifying questions. They try to get to the bottom of what is really going on there, why it is important, why it is resonating, why it is difficult. And then they share advice in a way of their experience and their stories. So they don't say, oh, you should do this. They say, when something similar happened to me, I felt this, I did this. And so basically it helps both ways. The person whose situation they're discussing is getting a different perspective, is getting a different chance to uncover some new depths of their experience. And also other people, they bring their own memories to the surface, which helps them. And then they will tell their own stories because it goes in circles. So let's say there are 3 people in a breakout room. So everybody will have a chance to bring up their situation, and every other person will have a chance to ask clarifying questions and share their advice.
So, those that are reluctant to share their stories, can you help them improve on their storytelling ability?
It all comes with practice. I had to say this, but I think what helps, and this is why I do what I do with the podcast and with my group program, I think seeing other people do that, be honest, be vulnerable, helps you also open up, because you see they do that and it's safe, and you know that you are not judging them. So hopefully over time, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, it will help you start sharing your stories. And again, you can start by offering some advice, by telling something from your experience, which is not necessarily a story. It can be as simple as one sentence, but you are contributing to somebody. So you know that you're providing value. And that can also be another advantage and another reason to do it, to say something. But then as you do more and more of it, like with your speaking engagements or with our podcasting journey, I'm sure both of us have the same experience. The more you do it, the more confident you become. It just comes back to starting and finding that safe space. And I don't even like the word safe that much. I would say free space where you can be yourself, where you can say whatever you want to say without worrying that you will be judged. And that might be with your partner, that might be with your children, that might be with yourself in the bathroom. Find that space and start. And then the snowball will start rolling from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, like when I think about podcasting, I've heard some pretty famous podcasters talk about how they don't even want to listen to their early episodes just because they just keep getting better. And, as human beings, we just want to be perfect in episode 1. But I know the same is true for me. I definitely have gotten better with time and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We want to be perfect from day one. My 11-year-old daughter, she hates so much when she's not perfect with something from first second, not even day one.
Yeah, I've experienced that with my kids too. Olena, this has been such a great conversation, such great stories. Is there anything else you want to add that we didn't talk about yet?
I just want to say that whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, it's so important to lean into our strengths because I think way too often we focus on fixing our weaknesses instead of really maximizing our strengths. And sometimes I like to give my students this very quick exercise. Think about something that you're not good at, something that you don't like doing, and you want to improve it, and come up in your mind with the plan on how to do it and see how you feel while you're coming up with that plan. And then think about something that you love doing, that you are good at, and come up with a plan of taking it to the next level, improving it even further. And again, notice how you're feeling. And I'm pretty confident that those feelings will be completely different. The first one will be maybe exhaustion, maybe boredom, maybe fear, but it's going to be hesitation. You don't want to do it. And the second one will be, I can't wait to do it. I really want to do it. So why do we have to fight ourselves instead of really understanding what is great about us and capitalizing on that? If we all do that, I believe the world will be a much better place for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. We're on the same page there. If we can work in our strengths the majority of the time, that's where it should be. And, there's always things that we have to do. There's always things that in our lives and our jobs that are weaknesses, and we can deal with those in a lot of different ways. But if we can spend the majority of the time in our strengths, that's the goal.
And the weaknesses will be elevated automatically. They will have no choice but to be improved.
Right. Okay, Elena, if anybody wants to find out more about the great work you're doing, where can they find that?
I have a website. It's called thebreviarie.com. And I have a podcast that is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's called Breviarie Handbook. And I'm also on Instagram as either Olena Mytruk, that's my personal account, or the Breviarie, where you can learn more about the work I do. So yeah, I would love to connect with you all. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message me, DM me. I always love to connect with like-minded people.
Thanks again. And I'll put that in the show notes. And thanks for sharing your story today. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me, David. That was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts, links to social media, and other items. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.